Agenda item 1 is apologies. Do we have any apologies?
We do, Convener. We've got apologies from Councillor Brown and from Councillor Robertson.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. Agenda item 3, minute of the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee held on the 14th of December 2023, pages 2 to 10 on your agenda papers. Can we agree the minute? Is there any matters arising from that minute? No, thank you. Agenda item 4 is the rolling action log, pages 11 to 14 on your papers, and we'll go to Mr. Perry for that.
Thank you, Convener. There's a few items on this. It's just maybe worth a little explanation. Page 12, item 629, the deposit return system update. We've had an update from the Director of Place Services just to say that there's been some progress in this, that the executive have agreed to maintain the curbside collection of glass alongside food and absorbent hygiene products. So, sorry, I'm reading the wrong part. He's been given the change in the scope of DRS and the subsequent agreement of the executive to maintain the curbside glass collection. He's asking whether the committee would be minded to take this off the rolling action log. I think nothing's going to happen with this just now, so it's something that we don't need to have as on our sites, if you like. So, are members minded to?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. It seems like it's been parked for quite some time, so I don't know when it will ever come back, if ever. So I'd be quite happy to take it off the rolling action log for the moment. But what does everybody else think?
I'd happily agree with that. Probably, it's something which is basically out with our control. It's an external organisation. If they do decide that they are going to promote it, then we can bring it back into it. But there's nothing that we're really doing with it. So I'd be happy for it to drop off.
Okay, thank you.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. Margaret, are you happy? Councillor Ansell, are you happy with that? Take it off the rolling action log because it's not going anywhere.
I don't have an issue with that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. We mentioned and just approved the minutes of the previous meeting. There's 2 pieces of work from the previous meeting that have now been added to the rolling action log, and that's the roads performance report. And the committee did ask that once the executive will consider the roads performance and possibly a new policy, that the committee would like to see how that works and if it makes any difference to the performance, which you talked about last time. So that's been added, and we can expect a report for the 5th of December meeting. And similarly to last meeting, we talked about the building maintenance performance, and again, that's going to be picked up by the executive, and the committee had asked that a report come back again 6 months after the implementation of any new procedures. And again, that's in the rolling action log for the 5th of December. And that will stay on the rolling action log until we get to the 5th of December. The final one is a motion on permitted development procedures. I think it was a motion that went to council that stood referred to the executive. The executive agreed to refer that to the Scrutiny Committee to consider. So we've put an indicative time reporting date of the 28th of March. That might be overly optimistic. We need to speak to the service about when they can do this report and the context within which the report will be brought forward. But this will stay on the rolling action log, and we'll get progress if it doesn't come to the 28th of March meeting.
Okay, any comment on that one?
No, better to be optimistic than pessimistic. So let's hope so.
Hope so. Councillor McCabe.
Thanks, Provost. As you can appreciate, myself and Councillor Forrest being members of the Planning Committee. I first brought this to Council. It stood then referred to the Executive. So I'd spoken it on the Executive, and as you're aware, I also spoke the following day at Planning. There's just some concerns that I did have with the whole process, not specific planning applications per se, but the whole process. So I'm pleased that we are seeing some movement on this, and again, like Councillor Forrest, you know, if we can be a wee bit optimistic and hope that they can maybe come back to us then. But there will be a bit of dialogue, I'm sure. I was talking to Mr. Perry earlier this morning. Hopefully there'll be a wee bit of dialogue with the department, and we get a kind of a route where we can agree to try and rectify some of the concerns that I have.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Benny.
With regard permitted development, that, you know, if we're going to have a scrutiny panel and that's coming back, you've got to remember not everybody's been on planning. So is there going to be training for some of the members beforehand? I think that actually got mentioned actually at the executive for a member. So I think if before we have that, I mean, I might not be on the scrutiny panel, but at the same time, we're supposed to get training because, as I say, only certain members are on planning. And, you know, it's quite complicated, a lot of regulation. So I would expect training before I was agreed to a scrutiny panel, because I'm on scrutiny, if you know what I mean. So makes sense, doesn't it?
Mr. Perry.
It's maybe just worth saying at this point, all that's been asked for is a report to come to the committee. Like we did before, we'll get a report like we did with the contact centre, and that will explain the situation, the context. You won't need planning training for that. It's about where applications are dealt with and how they're dealt with in the system, and that's a kind of process and procedure. I think, though, and Councillor McCabe would probably know better than me, I think the executive did agree to have a briefing on this for members, so that would take place. So you'll have a bit of background.
Yes.
The report would come, and much like any report that comes to the committee, if you read the report and you were satisfied with it, that's fine. If you thought, we need to dig into this, you can ask for more reports. It's only at a certain point, if you're still not happy, then you think we're going to put this to the council for a scrutiny plan and then a scrutiny panel. So that's some way down the line. I think you'll get your briefing, and then you'll get a report or maybe a series of reports that you maybe just want to tease through before you get to the point of thinking this needs even further, deeper investigation through a scrutiny panel. So the scrutiny panel route's some way off at this point.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thanks very much. Next.
If I could just
apologies.
Thanks, Provost. I think it's a very good point that Councillor Binney makes. It's one of the concerns that I did have, Lorna, in the fact that all councillors don't have some planning training, but we all have to deal with planning issues. You know, when we get the weekly list, you know, you may wish to call it in or whatever. So even getting a modicum of training to give you a bit of grounding and reasons for calling in and whatever. But again, without getting too deep into it, I'm aware that the planning department are looking into maybe changing the calling process and how that goes around. So the whole raft of further detail that's got to be worked out. But as Mr. Perry says, we're a wee bit. We're a wee bit ahead of ourselves. This is the beginning of the game, if you like, you know, and things will develop. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much. Next, agenda item 5, Scrutiny Plan 2024. It's pages 15 to 18 on your agenda papers, and we'll go to Mr. Perry for that.
Thank you. And talking of scrutiny panels, and I've mentioned before the contact centre. So the committee, you'll remember, considered a report on the performance of the contact centre last year, and having read the report and heard from officers, was minded to recommend to council that council include this in its scrutiny plan. And council did that. So it now comes back to the committee to take the work forward, and it does that by establishing a scrutiny panel. So really that's what's before members today. So it's to agree to set up a scrutiny panel. And 5.3 in the report just gives a little bit of background or information on the makeup of the panel. So normally, in terms of standing orders, it can be up to 5 members. The majority has to be the opposition. Scrutiny is an opposition-led arm of the decision-making model we have. In terms of membership, it can be any member of the council except members of the executive whose remit covers the review topic. So somebody that's on the education executive, for example, but not on the main executive, and there's a couple. could be on this. And then if we establish the size of the panel, I would write to the group leaders asking for nominations. Now I've done that. So on the presumption, and again, this has to be agreed by yourselves, that it's a 5-person scrutiny panel. And if it's to be opposition led, then we'd be talking about 2 members from the SNP, 1 Labour, 1 Conservative, and 1 from the independent members. So it's probably good to pause at this point and just ask if you're happy that that will be the membership of the composition, sorry, of the panel.
I'm happy with that, yep.
Okay. Everybody okay with that? That's fine.
Yeah,
So-
I agree.
Proceeding on that basis, I've still to hear, just obviously council's been rather busy in the past few days or so, from the SNP group for their 2 nominations, and from the Conservatives. I have heard from the leader of the Labour group, who's indicated that their nominee will be the Provost, and the independent group members have had a discussion and they're happy for Councillor McCabe to be their member. I will get the names of the other members as quick as I can and send an email around everybody so they know what the panel will be. We can, at this point, I think, appoint a convener. The convener has to be from the opposition side. So that would be from Provost, Councillor McCabe, or whoever the Conservatives were minded to nominate. I think it would be appropriate, but it's for you to decide whether it is appropriate that the convener should perhaps be the convener of the Scrutiny Committee. Just given that this is the first panel set up by the Scrutiny Committee under this iteration of council. But that's, again, a matter for you members to decide.
I'm happy for that recommendation or suggestion, Brian, rather than recommendation. I'm happy for the suggestion, and I'd be very pleased to nominate Provost Bissett becomes the chair.
Thank you.
Councillor Aitchison, Councillor Ansell.
I'd be
You
more than happy to support that.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will endeavour to complete the membership of the panel and let members know. I think I don't envisage the work of the panel, which would be supported by Kenny Gillespie and his teams, Anne-Marie Nielsen, until after the budget process is finished. So that would be early to mid-March, just with obviously the amount of work that goes into the budget by officers. I don't think it'd be fair to set up a panel, but we'll get that up and running as soon as we can after the budget.
Hi, Brian, could I ask a question? And has it been normal practice in the past?
Your light's going off.
There's been scrutiny panels in the past. Has it been normal practice? It's been the leader who's not on the scrutiny committee to pick the members for the scrutiny panel. I don't know if that was normal. I mean, I've been in scrutiny since 2017, but I don't know if you could maybe confirm that. I mean, is that a new practice, or has that always been like that? That's what I need to establish.
Sure. No, that's always been the case. It's much like when the council's asked to appoint members to a committee. Sometimes on the day we get names from the floor. Sometimes the group leaders produce a slate. So it's always been the case that we would hear from the group leaders, because obviously you could only really agree the committee members here to be on the panel, but there'll be other members, like as I say, somebody from the executive who's not here who may want to be on it. So it's remitted back to the group leaders, and that's always been the case.
That's fine. That's fine. That's good. Thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
And I think that's so. Just to say, at 5.1, it does go over a wee bit about what we'll be looking at. It would be how calls are handled by the contact centre and services, areas of potential service improvement within services, staffing levels required to meet call demand, and public perception of the contact centre. But as Mr. Purry said, that will be supported by the officers to kind of go deeper into that and scrutinise it in depth. And so once we've finished the work, does that get referred back to the council?
Probably in the first part, just to say on 5.1, we were very careful that we have the minutes of the meeting where you considered the report.
Mhm.
And from that, we've picked out the main areas.
Right.
When the panel meets, it will agree its remit based round about this, but they can extend within reason beyond that.
Mhm.
And the panel at its first meeting would agree a work plan. So it would agree its scope, and it would agree how it's going to go about its business, and then it would just work through that. It depends. The panel's set up by the Scrutiny Committee. So in the first instance, the panel would report back to the Scrutiny Committee.
Right.
If there are recommendations which require policy change, then the committee would refer that to the executive.
Okay.
If there were only comments back which were, we're very happy with this, or this is getting changed, but we know officers are just going away and changing it, then that doesn't need to go further. It would only go beyond the Scrutiny Committee if there was policy changes that the executive need to look at. So it very much depends on the recommendations that come out of the panel review.
Right.
But certainly, if you have recommendations over policy and practice, or indeed funding, because that was an issue, and you want to make recommendations to that, the panel would make it to the Scrutiny Committee, and the Scrutiny Committee has to decide whether it accepts those recommendations, and if it does, they would then go on to the executive. So it's quite a
Right.
convoluted, might be the word, but it's a good process. It just keeps everything in train.
Okay, thanks very much. So I think that's brings us to the end of the Scrutiny Committee meeting. So thanks very much.
Sorry, I was going to ask a wee question here. Sorry,
Yeah,
Provost,
yeah.
but regarding the people that's not going to be on the scrutiny panel, I would like to make a suggestion. I think because not all members have actually been to the contact centre. I remember in the past, years ago, I actually went there and I spoke to the staff, and they actually explained how the process worked. I sometimes feel actually speaking to people, seeing how the process is really helpful for a panel in the future. Okay, there's going to be reports, but there's nothing better than a tangible approach, speaking to people and even asking them questions if you were allowed. Would that be possible?
Yes, it's up to the panel to decide how it wants to go about its business, but I would think that's an entirely reasonable suggestion. I think you need to understand, you've had the report and it was explained in a lot of detail about how calls are handled, but absolutely, I think that's something the panel would want to do and possibly need to do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, I certainly agree with that, Councillor Binney. It's like a planning site visit. It kind of gives you a good idea. So if you're actually there and speaking to the people who are actually doing the job, I think you'll get realistic feedback and a good call. So that brings us to the end of business for the Scrutiny Committee today. So thanks very much for your attendance, and see you at the council meeting.
Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Provost.